Welcome to the GoPhish podcast, where we dig into the real world stories of the people defending businesses from scams, hacks, and social engineering attacks that never seem to stop. I'm Dan Thornton, and today I'm joined by Stephen Ridgway from th4ts3cur1ty.company. Stephen is the co-founder and COO of th4ts3cur1ty.company, a boutique cybersecurity firm specializing in helping businesses identify attacks and adversaries, protecting business assets, responding to threats, and recovering from data breaches and cyber attacks. If you're in the cybersecurity space, how fast things are shifting, and it's not just on the tech side. Threats are getting smarter, scams are getting sneakier, and businesses are starting to realize that firewalls and fancy tech don't mean much if your people keep clicking on the wrong things. That's why I'm excited for this conversation today to hear how that security company is navigating those changes, where they see the biggest risks right now, and how MSSPs can play an even bigger role in helping customers stay safe. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to speak to you here.
Fantastic. Stephen, for people who don't know your company, th4ts3cur1ty.company, what's your focus and who are your typical customers that you're supporting?
Okay, well, we're actually a pretty broad spectrum when it comes to cyber services. The business is sort of split down the middle between managed services and consultancy services, and we offer to our customers pretty much the whole range of things that they would need in order to take them from not having an alignment with their business maturity through to the cyber maturity and their business maturity being properly aligned. Customer base, again, is very broad. So I think when Eliza and I started the business, we assumed that we were going to start working with sort of smaller organizations, but very rapidly discovered that all organizations, from the smallest to some surprisingly large multinational companies, share a lot of the same challenges that we've got solutions for. So we actually now deal with everybody from quite the one-man bands, but nearly, all the way up to some very large multinational organizations.
That's quite surprising that your multinationals are not investing in this in-house. I always pictured the MSSP and the companies like yours providing the service to the small, mid-size organizations that didn't have the budget to be able to build their in-house teams. But you're telling me that large enterprise multinationals are outsourcing their security as well.
Yeah, it tends to be that we work in partnership with the internal teams when we're talking about larger organizations. So for them, it makes sense to have specialists doing specific things. So when you look at it from the point of view of a multinational, yeah, could they do this stuff themselves? Yes, they could. Is it core business for them? No, it's not. So if you need to run a 24/7 security operations center, yeah, you might want some of your own people doing that, but you don't really want to be creating a cottage industry of recruiting and developing these people internally. If, for example, you're a shipping company or you're a publisher or you're whatever it might be, it's not your core business. So you need to have enough of those skills in-house to receive the service. But you're better off having specialists delivering you the bulk of the service, because it gives you that flexibility, and it means that if you're looking at it through the CFO or the CIO perspective lens, you're not kind of trying to build a cyber business off the back of a transport business or an oil business or whatever it may be.
For sure. Now, you've been in the trenches of cybersecurity for a while. What originally led you into the MSSP space, and what's keeping you in the industry?
So I've worked on both sides of the fence over the years. So I've come up through a kind of technical approach to these things. I've always been very keen on how stuff works. And I've also been very interested in what happens when it doesn't do quite what you're expecting it to do. So I found myself on the infrastructure side of things. So how does it all hang together and how does everything talk? Which led very rapidly into, well, what's everything saying when it is talking across your networks? And how can you identify things that you don't really want happening, which made a very seamless transition from understanding sort of networks and firewalls, server-side computing, end-user computing, into, well, how do you secure all of this stuff? And I've done that both within organizations, and then I've worked for consultancies. I've worked for another MSSP in the past. And it got to a point where my business partner, Eliza May Austin, and I were sitting down a few years ago over a glass of wine prior to starting the business, just complaining about how terrible everything was, mainly from the vendor side, the supplier side. in cyber, how we thought everybody that we dealt with did a terrible job. We kind of looked each other in the eye after the second glass of wine sort of thing and said, well, we actually think we know what good looks like. Why don't we go and do this? Nobody else seems to be doing it well enough, at least not by our standards. So we kicked off the business based around the fact that we thought we could do it better, which I know kind of comes across probably as a little bit like, but it's worked. It's worked very well.
That's the journey of so many, or at least the start of so many businesses, where they try and scratch their own itch or solve their own problem, or if you've had a bad experience, that's fine. How many services did you guys start out with, Stephen? How large was the initial offering? How many sort of specialties were you offering, and how did you build that?
We spent some time thinking about what the business model should look like. So rather than rushing into, this is the first idea we've had, let's go and do that, we actually spent some time thinking about how should this hang together? What does it look like through the customer lens? What do they really need? What do they value? The things we launched with at the beginning was a lightweight sock and seam service that was aimed at SMEs, because it remains actually a particular area of weakness, that large organizations can afford visibility and understand the value of having security visibility. Smaller organizations either don't realize that they can't really see what's going on and don't really know what's happening, or they do know that they've got a gap, but when you're looking at the cost of sock and seam services, it's prohibitively expensive. So we started out with, well, there's a need, plus some space for some education. We can fill that. That's a niche that we can go into. So we started out with that. And to complement that, we've both done consultancy work as well. So we started out with, okay, we'll build a sock and seam service, and we will do broad cybersecurity consultancy depending on what's required from the customer at any particular time, which we kicked off pretty much at the beginning of the first lockdown in the UK in cyber. So if you could think of a more challenging market to try and break into, that was our baptism of fire. And we've been going great guns since then. We've had year on year growth. We're doing very well. Our customers, we care more about our customers than our own stuff, right? We're not out there chasing the money. We're out there making sure that our customers are getting some real tangible improvements in security, and that's gone very well.
Brilliant, Stephen. Yeah, good to hear. In the 5 years since you guys have been in the market and working with customers, what do you reckon's been the biggest evolution in cyber threats or customer needs that you guys have had to be dealing with?
Since we started the business, we've had global pandemics and we've had wars in various regions, some of which are ongoing. That is certainly in my experience is kind of an unprecedented position to be in, and I think it's been an enormous challenge to most of our customers, from the smallest right the way up to the biggest. Customers understanding how to secure their business while transitioning from a traditional office-based environment to a predominantly working from home, and then onto a kind of hybrid working from home, working in the office business. I think that's been very difficult for some organizations to work through. Some of the traditional cyber defenses don't work well when you suddenly dissipated your workforce across, literally hundreds, if not thousands of locations, potentially across multiple countries or multiple continents. So I would say that's something that we've had to help customers overcome. So some of the challenges associated with how do you remain secure, and how do you know that your technical controls are doing what they're supposed to be doing under those circumstances. So how can you be certain from the customer perspective that if they put technical controls in place, that those technical controls are really working, when you aren't centralizing people into particular places where you can go and check on what they're doing particularly well? That's quite hard, but there are ways of doing it.
And are you seeing, with that in mind, and the sort of remote working risk, or as businesses sort of grow and go global and open more offices, or people are working remotely, the increasing demand for security around that, still mainly around technical defenses, or are you seeing more focus or more demand on the human side of things as well, and your sort of human risk management?
I think we are partway through a transition in the industry from cybersecurity being a niche aspect of technology through to cybersecurity being something which encompasses both the technical controls, but also all the processes and procedures, standards, policies, and so on. But going on beyond that, you've then got to actually get the mindset right within the people that work in your organization. And that whole transition is, it's not easy to do. There's one argument which you see put around a lot is that cybersecurity is everybody's business, and that everybody in your organization should be thinking, well, and I kind of see where that's coming from, but you've got to use that in the right context, because actually the majority of people in an organization are not tasked with cybersecurity. So really what you're trying to do is create an environment in which the things that they do, they can do safely, but they can get their job done. So they're not sitting there thinking, can I open this email, for example? Email, phishing being the entry point of phishing, smishing, these social engineering type attacks being the entry point for 80+% of most successful compromise. You don't want people to be sitting there going, I've just received an email. Let me first of all not open it because it might be dangerous. You actually want them to do that job. You want them to be able to get on with their business.
Yeah.
So helping them to understand, you need enough technical controls that the vast majority of stuff which is easily spottable never hits them. You then need to make it some education around what are the clues they might look for that will help them to know whether the thing that they're about to do or open or read is what it says it is. And then thirdly, the thing which I think we see done worst in a lot of organizations is what happens if they get it wrong. And we see a lot of organizations that kind of beat up their own employees for clicking on a link. So you really don't want to be coming down like a ton of bricks on people for making an honest mistake, because all you do then is engender some weird behaviors around not admitting it was you, or how do I try and cover this up. You want it the other way around. You want to make it easy to report. You want your cyber team to be coming back saying, hey, thanks for telling us about this, we caught it, it didn't do any damage. Not you hit it, and by the way, now we're under ransomware attack and half the business is offline.
Yeah. And it comes to, the term security culture or cyber culture, and building this out and building awareness and building your maturity amongst your employees. It's as much as it is a sort of training skill requirement, and as much as the importance of the training element and the technical element, and your cybersecurity team, a lot of the time, the majority of the time is responsible for it. It's actually a lot of soft skills. It's a huge soft skill to do that properly, and to build out that culture and build the messaging around it and the right communication, and to get buy-in from your employees and your teams. And a lot of people think that the training is all you need for it, and there is so much more there for sure. And if it is done badly, it can backfire horribly. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
No, I very much agree with that. I mean, there's training in this space needs to actually engage people in behavior changes. So you're aiming really to get your workforce to think about this stuff and want to do the right thing, not just see it as a piece of boring training and then some policies that I don't want to follow because they get in the way of my job.
And yeah, and it's a tough one. It's a really
Absolutely,
tough one. The analogy I often use is security awareness training and security culture building today in 2025 is where the HSE industry was at the start of the 90s. They've been through this.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When they started, nobody gave a shit about HSE. Nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody was interested. This is not my job. This is getting in the way. This is just absolute cost to the business. We're not interested in it. And look at where it's come. It took a long time.
Yeah, very much so. I agree. And you have to start from an understanding that it is somewhere you want to get to. We haven't necessarily quite got to the point where people realize the importance of doing this stuff.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's going to be a slow process. It needs to be small steps. As you say, step one, understanding the importance of it can be a step one. Changing one or two behaviors because you really understand the benefit of that behavior to yourself as an individual first, and then you take that behavior into the organization, and that can then help them as well. But it's small steps, because geez, I mean, the amount of new skills and new information and constant bombarding of new media and new is unrelenting today. So to expect your employees to be adopting a ton of new security skills and new security behaviors is unrealistic, on top of all the other work that they've got. So it really is something that needs to be done in baby steps. Otherwise, it'll just be too overwhelming, and people won't ever see return on it and see major benefits of it, because people just won't adopt it.
No, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, certainly if you work in larger organizations, there's a whole load of things that you do because you have to, rather than because you particularly understand why you need to, do these things. There are a bunch of policies you've got to sign up to. There's some, tick box training you've got to go through, whatever it might be. When I was quite junior, I would still have to go through the anti-bribery training because I worked in financial services. Right? Nobody on the planet would have tried bribing me. There was nothing I could, but either it didn't matter. I still had to go through it. So it was like, how quickly can I click my way through this and get the answers right to the questions at the end? But with cybersecurity, we're kind of hoping that if it's done right, people will come away from that thinking, oh, actually, here are some risks to not just to my business, but also to me. How might this affect me? Is the stuff that I've learned here, which actually I might be able to take home and help protect my family as well. Now, how to identify a phishing email. If your business is going to pay somebody to teach you how to do that, you can take that back and you can teach your kids. You can teach your family. How do you spot these? How do you avoid getting in that mess? So you can kind of make it real for people in their work life, because they can relate to how that would affect them, not only at work, but outside of work as well.
100%. You talk about compliance and having to do things and ticking boxes. There's a lot of talk about regulation driving change in the security industry. So from compliance mandates to even insurance pressures, coming from the cyber insurance companies, are you seeing that create any momentum with your customers and in your space, or is it still?
Yeah.
Is it causing more cybersecurity adoption and buy-in and budget because of the regulations? And with that, are companies just blindly doing checkbox exercise?
I would say the answer is yes to all of that. So, yeah, clearly if regulations are changing, it affects all businesses and pretty much all of our customers. Our smaller customers tend to be UK based. So, the online safety bill at the moment, they're all trying to work out what potential impacts that might have. International customers have got to deal with this stuff across various jurisdictions, so that can be really quite challenging for them. The difficulty is that a lot of this legislation doesn't seem to be particularly well thought out. So that does tend to drive tick box response. You can't ignore it. It's not really helping. But you're going to have to do something about it anyway.
Done. Yeah.
That, I think, is actually quite unhelpful, because it presents cybersecurity controls as being an irritation or a cost or a delay or whatever it may be, rather than being something that actually helps.
And instead of businesses looking at it properly from a true sort of risk management program, they're just going to do the bare minimum that they can tick the boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the point of view of what happens if you have to comply with legislation that isn't actually going to help, it creates a culture of how do I work around this stuff rather than how do I adopt these things. And we get some, in the UK, there are some very odd decisions being made around things like end-to-end encryption. I think it's WhatsApp has just pulled a whole load of end-to-end encryption facility from the UK market in response to the government effectively saying they're going to ban end-to-end encryption. So they pulled up WhatsApp on it, and WhatsApp have actually just disabled the features in the UK. Other organisations will also then be looking at what happens next around whether they, what do they do? Signal, I know, has said, well, if governments start messing with this too much, they might just pull out of certain markets. Whether they will or not, I don't know. But overall, it's difficult to see how that's actually helping the security of the majority of people. Yes, I get it around law enforcement want easy access to things that criminals are doing. But if in the process they're putting everybody else's information at risk, has this really taken us forward? So these sorts of things, they're kind of
slippery, yeah. It's a slippery slope, isn't it? It's a big, broad justification for all sorts.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look historically, governments that take excessive interest in the minutiae of their citizens' lives have not tended to be governments that we would see as being, good governments to live here, good environment to live under.
Exactly. Stephen, AI is a massive subject and has been for a few years. It's everywhere in the headlines. Are you seeing it change the game yet? Are you seeing it in the cybersecurity space having serious impact, either in the way that attackers are operating or how you guys are defending your clients using it? Is there big impact, or do you think it's all still talk and we're going to see a lot of development coming?
No, I think we're just beginning to see some real changes coming through. I would say if you'd asked me this question 12, 18 months ago, I'd say, well, yeah, it looks promising, but it's all in the future. But some of that stuff's actually happening now. One of the ones which I think is most interesting, especially in the context around phishing, is that AI-written phishing emails actually have decent grammar. They actually read quite well. So the previous methods of teaching people how to avoid at least the most obvious of phishing was, look for bad grammar, look for use of emojis that you just wouldn't expect in that kind of email. The usual sort of, just that usually it's a badly written. Well, AI can now write you a very good email that can, if you tell AI to write it with a business voice, it'll write you a phishing email in a business voice. And it can be very convincing. Almost, I think we've almost gone too far with that, by the way. And I think you can actually spot some because they're too well written. There is not a single grammatical mistake. The structure is absolutely... Yeah. You look at it and go, I don't really think a human wrote that. Unless this human's a professor of English language.
Exactly. I certainly don't know any humans who could write that well. So, but yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, on top of that as well as the customization, en masse, we used to talk about phishing was generic, was spray and pray. It was a large net over many possible hits, but it was super easy to spot because they had to be generic. And if you were highly targeted by some scammers or hackers, then they would talk about spear phishing, where they would put a target pack together and gather information on you and then craft something that was much more convincing. Well, AI can do that en masse on hundreds of thousands of targets now. I mean, there's marketing apps now that can scrape the internet of everything you've said over the last sort of 2 months and then craft a perfect email to hook you into a meeting. So, I mean, if marketing agencies can use this now, I mean, the technology's out there and it's going to be used for sure.
It is being, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Spear phishing used to be a niche market that would require hours and hours of humans searching for things and kind of joining the dots in order to be that convincing. That can be done in seconds now using AI models.
Yeah. How much demand, Stephen, are you guys getting for the anti-phishing stuff and helping train the employees? I mean, I know this is a service that you guys offer. How's the demand on it? I mean, across your book of customers, how many of them are actually training up their employees? How common is it now?
I would say roughly 80% have got something in place, which it goes beyond the kind of tick box, compliance stuff, where they're actually really trying. Some of the larger organisations we work with have got some fantastic programs in place to help educate and support their users throughout all of this. But they also tend to be the sorts of organisations that can invest in the email services from some of the bigger players. So most things coming through have been very well checked before they ever arrive.
Yeah.
And then at the other end, the users are made aware of current campaigns, things that might be targeting them, how to identify this stuff, and also what to do. And especially, as I say, what to do if they've made a mistake. That kind of, I'm going to put my hand up. kind of stuff,
Yeah.
knowing that they're not about to get a kicking from anybody. So that works quite well. Smaller organizations tend to have to rely on, well, either your email provider does some stuff itself and you cross your fingers and hope that's okay, or you're going to have to train your users a bit on what's going on, but they don't have access to the tooling and they don't really have access to the level of intel that help them to know whether they are being targeted or not at any one time. So their response tends to be more generic. But we do see, I would say probably north of 80% are doing something meaningful in this space now.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a huge improvement than a few years ago, for sure. What's the toughest part of running and scaling an MSSP these days? Is it the tech? Is it the people, the market, or something else? Where's your biggest struggles?
I wouldn't say tech. I think there's too much tech in this space, and actually picking the stuff that's really going to work, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it isn't that there's a lack of it. We are very fortunate that we don't seem to have a problem with recruiting or retaining people to help deliver the services, and I know that's not always the case. And so I know that generically there seems to be a lack of people in cyber, or the requirements for people with cyber skills kind of outstrip the number of people that are there. We just see it, I think at the moment we see it as a growing market. Understanding their risks better and are focusing better on what mitigations they want to put in place to those risks, which is great from an MSSP perspective. We can now have better conversations than we were having, say, 3-4 years ago, and identifying, well, can we assist with that stuff, or in fact, if it's not us, well, do we know anybody that we might be able to direct them towards whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So, but from a challenges perspective, probably the biggest challenge that we've got is geopolitical uncertainty. And I know that's kind of lifted it sky high, but it is things like, is there about to be another war? Are we going to all get tied down with trade tariffs that mean that nobody can do business anymore? Those have an impact on business confidence, and that cascades through. So as a supplier, our customers need to understand the real risks, but they also need to be confident to invest in applying the risk mitigations that they want. And if they're sitting there going, well, okay, we've got cash in the bank right now, but if these trade tariffs hit us, that's going to evaporate really quickly. There are going to be areas that they'll want to cut back on. And whilst tech and cyber aren't seen as being kind of expendable anymore, they are somewhat more elastic, so the timings of things can change. So that's a bit of a challenge. But as I said, we kicked off the business in the middle of a global pandemic, and we've built the business during 2 substantial wars. We're fairly good, I think, at weathering these things and helping our customers weather them as well.
Yeah, the budget issue is definitely a big one out there now, and it's really good insight on what's causing a bit of hoarding of some cash flow for now. But yeah, really interesting. Stephen, before we wrap it up, can you let listeners know how they can learn more about that security company and connect with you online?
Sure. So you can find me via that security company, which is spelt in an absolutely terrible way. But I guess you can post that in the description. So you can find us through the website. Do a lot of blogs and posts coming out in LinkedIn. We're very active in LinkedIn. We've got stuff on YouTube as well. We'll increasingly have some more video content coming out this year. And yeah, so if you want to discuss, we're not just out there trying to sell stuff. If people just want to discuss cybery type things with us, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Drop me a line. I'm bound to respond at some point.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, mate. Yeah, that's it for today's episode of GoPhish. Massive thanks to Stephen for sharing his insights. It's always great to get the raw, unfiltered view from somebody in the thick of it. Thanks again for listening. And if you found this valuable, drop us a follow and feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Catch you guys next time. Thank you very much.